Today is the feast day or the memorial day of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, as well as being Maundy Thursday. And he's one of the greats of the 20th century. He was born in Germany in 1906 and ordained into the Lutheran Church. And he was very much influenced by one of the other great theologians of that century, Karl Barth. And Bonhoeffer became a lecturer, first in Spain, then in the United States. And then in 1931, he came back to Berlin. He's very much opposed to Nazism, and he was one of the leaders of the Confessing Church, a movement that broke away from the Nazi-dominated Lutherans in 1934. He was banned from teaching, and eventually he returned to Germany again at the outbreak of war in 1939, despite being on a lecture tour in the United States. His defiant opposition to the Nazis led to his arrest in 1943. His experiences led him to propose a more radical theology in his later works, which have been influential among post-war theologians, and he was murdered by the Nazis in Flossenbürg concentration camp on this day in 1945. So I'm going to read a brief bit from a letter which he wrote to his friend Eberhard Bethge, written from Tegel prison, dated the 21st of July 1944. During the last year or so, I've come to know and understand more and more the profound this-worldliness of Christianity. The Christian is not only a homo religios, but simply a human being, as Jesus was human, in contrast, shall we say, to John the Baptist. I don't mean the shallow and banal this-worldliness of the enlightened, the busy, the comfortable, or the lascivious, but the profound this-worldliness characterized by discipline and the constant knowledge of death and resurrection. I remember a conversation that I had in America 13 years ago with a young French pastor. We were asking ourselves quite simply what we wanted to do with our lives. He said he would like to become a saint, and I think it's quite likely that he did become one. At the time, I was very impressed, but I disagreed with him and said, in effect, that I should like to learn to have faith. For a long time, I didn't realise the depth of the contrast. I thought I could acquire faith by trying to live a holy life or something like it. I suppose I wrote The Cost of Discipleship as the end of that path. Today, I can see the dangers of that book, though I still stand by what I wrote. I discovered later, and am still discovering right up to this moment, that it's only by living completely in this world that one learns to have faith. One must completely abandon any attempt to make something of oneself, whether it be a saint or a converted sinner, or a churchman, a so-called priestly type, a righteous person or an unrighteous one, a sick or a healthy one. By this worldliness, I mean living unreservedly in life's duties, problems, successes and failures, experiences and perplexities. In so doing, we throw ourselves completely into the arms of God, taking seriously not our own sufferings, but those of God in the world watching with Christ in Gethsemane. That, I think, is faith. That is metanoia. And that is how one becomes a human being and a Christian. How can success make us arrogant or failure lead us astray when we share in God's sufferings through a life of this kind? I'm glad to have been able to learn this, and I know I've been able to do so only along the road that I've travelled. So I'm grateful for the past and the present and content with them. You may be surprised as such a personal letter, but for once I want to say this kind of thing. To whom should I say it? May God in his mercy lead us through these times, but above all, may he lead us to himself.